Hi, welcome to week 3. We're actually going into JavaScript this week. Um, so let's kind of open up some code, and then I'll kind of tell you what JavaScript's all about, where it comes from, that type of thing. So while we're in the Google Classroom, click on Classwork, and we have this thing called Shell for Coding. Now, before we get there, what I'd like for you to do is download this thing called Notepad++. Go ahead, and if you need to pause the video to download it and install it, go ahead and do that now, and then basically unpause the video to come back. So once you have Notepad++, you come in here at the very top of the page under Classwork is Shell for Coding. So what you do is you click on that, and you click on this link right here, and it will bring up this, okay? So we've seen this before, we used it last time. Click copy, and then go to Notepad and paste it in. So this is nothing new. We've done this for the various HTML and CSS that we've been doing. So we have this open, so let's talk about JavaScript. What is it? Well, it's basically code that appears in HTML, so it's basically embedded inside the HTML code. And what it does is it does things like it lists for events. Like if you have a mouse button, and if you click on the left mouse button, the right mouse button, well, if you push the mouse button down, that's an event. When you let up on the mouse button, which is called mouse up, that's also an event. Moving your mouse is an event. There's all kinds of different events. Clicking on a keyboard, key, that type of thing. So there's a whole lot of different events that happen that we can capture and actually execute something. We can have it actually modify our page. We can have it modify the font. We can have it modify the CSS. So, or we can have actually have JavaScript modify how our page currently looks. Modify the text, whatever the case may be. We can actually kind of have things move around on the screen. I'll show you a demonstration here in a second where I actually have my retirement countdown. It actually is counting down. It knows the date and the time right now from the computer, and it can basically count down to the retirement. That's JavaScript behind the scenes. We can also create some different games and things like that with JavaScript. It's very, very super complex. We can communicate data between server and the client. So the server being basically maybe something on our ISP site where it's stored there, and then basically we are the client. So the program is running on the server, and then everybody who logs into that server is a client, and we can actually then have JavaScript that runs between those two. We can have it interact with webcams and microphones and basically about any device connected to our system. Now, we're not going to get anywhere near that complex. This class is an intro to JavaScript, so that's really all the more we are going to do. I do want to kind of show you some examples of some JavaScript and what it can do. I do have a link to this in the Google Classroom. It is called CodePen, and these are what this is. This is kind of a place where all developers will kind of say, hey, I developed this really new cool thing. Here, take a look at it. And so if we go through here, and let's see. Look at the project. Okay, there we go. Hold on. I had to log in, so once I logged in, I was able to see. So here's some different trending things going out there. So let's just take a look. Now, not all these have JavaScript, but let's see. What if I go here? Okay, what we're going to see is we're going to see 3 different windows at the top. One is the HTML, this middle one is the CSS, and this one over here is the JavaScript. And this is basically what is going on. So here it's got this graphic, and you can click on it as you move around keep clicking on it, it keeps basically kind of doing this explosion out, explosion in. And that's all done with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together. Now you can look at this and you can go, oh my gosh, that looks super complex. And again, it is very complex. But if you were a JavaScript developer for a few years, you could probably read this pretty easily. And again, if you were an HTML and CSS developer, you could basically read these things as well and kind of have an understanding of what's going on there. Yeah, this is a fun page to kind of go look at and kind of experiment. You can actually copy this code down to your own computer and then kind of play around with different things. Like say, here's one for, it says scroll down. Is there any JavaScript? Let's see. Yep, so there's some JavaScript. So as we scroll down, look what it does. That is pretty cool. You can scroll back up as well. So as you use your mouse wheel to scroll down, it's like you're going up above the mountains and the trees, and a bird goes by, some trees, more mountains, and then it becomes nighttime, bats come out, and then the stars come out, and then you can scroll back. So that's pretty cool. So there's a lot going on there. So anyways, just some nice, really cool examples to kind of look at. So that's CodePen. So if we come over here, and this is what I kind of told you about. So this is my retirement, and you can see that it's counting down. And wow, that looks pretty cool. So how does that work? Well, if I do a right click on this and I click on View Page Source, this is basically what it looks like. So you can see that we can see a whole lot of code here between these script tags, and we've kind of seen that before. We know what the script tags do. And so there's all of the different JavaScript that's basically going on there. And it basically has a process where it just kind of keeps executing. It just keeps going and going and going and going. So kind of a cool thing. So again, we'll kind of cover that in a little more detail as we kind of go along. We'll get in, I think it's chapter 7 has timers. So, okay. So that's JavaScript. If I can get back, there we go. Yeah. There we go. So let's take a look at some JavaScript. So if you look on page 7, it basically talks about language popularity, and JavaScript is probably the most popular programming part of HTML. That's probably the most popular. It's probably the one that's been around the longest as well. So it's a very, very used language. It does run on the browser. Some of those other languages like PHP actually runs on the server, so when you click on something, it runs up there and then it displays down on the client. So it is truly a client-server application. So, so very first thing in every programming language is the old hello world situation. So somehow I closed Notepad. Let's reopen it. And so here we have our shell that we've been using. And down here inside of our script, I'm just going to type in alert, left paren, double quote, hello world, exclamation point, ending. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and let's save that. And we're going to go ahead and call that hello world. And we will save it as, what we can do, we've done this before, we're going to save it as a hypertext markup language. So we click that and we'll click save. And then wherever we saved it at, we can actually come in here and, here it is. I'll double click on it and boom, this alert screen pops up and it says hello world. And that's all there is. So let's talk about the code for a second. So again, we know it's HTML in the head and style in the body. We know what it is, but we do have this script. Now, all JavaScript needs to go inside of this script. I won't say all, I'm going to say probably most all will go inside of this script tag. So what happens is the body goes along and it hits the script, and it knows as soon as it sees this script tag, it basically automatically goes into JavaScript mode and knows that code is now executable, and it will go ahead and execute it. So we went from body tag to ending body tag, and it hit the script, switched to JavaScript mode, executed that as JavaScript, displayed that box. Now let's talk about some of the what's going on here. So this is a command, alert, and hello world, and so the alert has left and right parentheses, and it says whatever's inside of these parentheses, it's going to display in a box that appears with an OK button. And then at the very end, we always have to have a semicolon at the end of every line. So any line that executes has to have that. So that's as simple as it gets right there. So that basically, let me see, you're trying to look here, yeah. So again, semicolon is very, very important, and that's pretty much it for chapter 1. So chapter 2 now we get into this thing called variables. And now what's nice is I do have all of these programs, I've already got them pre-written that you can actually download them as a zip file, unexpand, or basically expand them, and you can basically just open these all up. If you haven't done that yet, go ahead and pause the video, go out to the classroom and download the zip file. It should be source files, and basically get those and open those up, and then come back and unpause this video. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to click File, Open, and the very first one is Chapter 2, Using Variables. We open that up, and in there I've got this word let. My text equal hello world. So whenever we declare a variable, we do have the word let. It says let. That says I'm declaring a variable. The name of this variable is called my text, and it's going to be equal to double quote hello world ending double quote. So it's what's called a text literal. And at the end, you notice we have the semicolon. Now I do the alert my text, so it's going to take whatever is in this my text variable and display it in my alert. So if we go back out here to where we have this stored at, and I see chapter 2 using variables and double click, hold on, I had made a blunder. What I did is I had a lowercase t right here, and so JavaScript is case sensitive, so you got to make sure you have a capital T in there, and then save it, and then we'll rerun it, and there is the hello world alert. Okay, so I did that on purpose. Yeah. Okay, so variables. We use the word let to create a variable. Let's see. Naming variables, I was always try to use very descriptive names. I talk about this in some of my other programming classes where I had a situation where I had to maintain a program, and somebody wrote it just like the Alice in Wonderland. They had Alice, they had the Jabberwocky, they had Tweedledum, Tweedledee. They had all those different names, the Dodo, and it made no sense. It was cute, but it made no sense. I'm looking at a variable, I'm like, what is this? So I literally had to go in and rename everything so that it made sense. And I made sure I put comments in there. We'll talk more about comments in another chapter. But it basically, programs should always be written in the sense that someone is going to be coming behind you to maintain this code. So it's basically very, very important that you name things very well For example, this is my text, doesn't really make sense, but think about bank account, first name, last name, street address, city, state, zip code, those types of things. Maybe you call it 10-digit zip code, it would be nine-digit zip code, just 5 and 4. So if you wanted them, so now that makes sense. When you see that variable, you know, oh, I'm expecting 9 digits. Okay, so naming, very, very important. There is a website. If we go to so if we go to bit.ly/name validator, there you can type in a variable name to see if it's legal or not. So if I were to type in F name, that's good, it's green. If I type in first space name, that's not. We're not allowed to have spaces. What if I wanted to do one name? Notice we can't do that. Variables cannot start with a numeric character. They have to start with either a letter or an underscore. I could basically call that underscore one name. If I try to dash one name, can't do that either. So it has to be either an underscore or letter, has to start with that. No spaces. So if you ever basically wanted to utilize and make sure you have a valid variable name, you can actually come here to check that out. And that link is on the top of page 19. Okay. Also, the book talks about this. Having the word let is optional. I could just say my text hello world is equal to my hello world, and when I run this, I'm going to get the same exact results. Okay, but it says that while not recommended, this is completely fine. And the reason it's not, because there's a lot of things that come along with that command, the command prompt let basically lets you know that is setting a variable. Now, I think they talk about it here, but there is also, and this is basically, think of this as old JavaScript, they have the word var. Now, var is completely legal. It's a way to declare a variable, but there are different things that happen for a let and for a var, and the book will basically talk about that as well. I do want to show you one more. I believe I have this in our code. I'm going to go ahead and put let back in there. If we do open, and I think it is alternative, chapter 2 alternative. If we take a look at that, you'll notice we're not using the script tag. So I'm trying to let you know that, hey, this is another way to do that. So let's take a look. I've got P tag, paragraph tag, and it's got an ID equals demo. Now we've seen ID in the past, and this is kind of a different flavor for ID. If I did have a CSS that had that ID, it would work as well. But let's take a look to see how it also can be used for JavaScript. So I display the text, JavaScript is fun. And below that, I have button, type button, and we've seen what a button does, but this one now has onClick. OnClick, and it says document.getElementById demo. So this is now JavaScript. It says, hey, I want you to execute this JavaScript code, and I want you to grab the demo ID element, which is this guy right here, and .enter HTML. This means keep it inside of the HTML. and I want you to display the phrase hello world. On the button itself, it's going to say click me. So notice so what this says is put hello world where JavaScript is fun. That's basically what it's going to do. So when we run that, it says JavaScript is fun, click me, and when I do, it changed to hello world. So again, not expecting you to know what's going on there, but just want to make you aware that there are other alternatives to running JavaScript as well. Okay. Chapter 3 gets into this thing called functions. So let's go ahead and bring up in our code, we're going to bring up Chapter 3 speed time function. So let's take a look at it. So inside of our script, I have function, show distance, speed time. Okay. I think I might be getting ahead of myself. Hold on. Let's open up. I think simple function. I'm sorry. Open up simple function. So here I've got. We'll cover speed time in a second. So here I've got function, say hello, left and right parenthesis, and then I've got my open brace. And it says alert, hello world. So this guy will not execute until it's called upon. So a function says, I'm a function that's callable by somewhere within this code. The name of this function is called say hello. When it's executed, it's going to call the alert command, and inside of that it has hello world. Down here I just say hello, left and right parenthesis. Whenever I call a function, I have to make sure I always use parentheses. Sometimes things goes inside of those parentheses, and sometimes, like in this case, they don't. So this just calls that function, which is going to say alert hello. So if I had this, if I didn't, well, let's run it first. And there it pops up the alert, hello. Now, if I were to get rid of that say hello, I'm going to save it. And when I run it again, so I'm just going to do a refresh right here, you'll see nothing happens. Why? Because that function was not called. Even though that code exists, since it wasn't called, it's not executed. So when I put it back in and save it, and I come back out here and do a refresh, there's the hello world again, because now that function was executed. So now let's take a look at that at the speed time function. And so let's take a look at this guy. So now I've got function show distance. So the name of the function is show distance. This time I have some parameters inside of the parentheses. It's speed and time separated by a comma. Inside of there I've got alert, speed times time. So it's going to take those two, multiply them together, and put them into an alert box. Down below there I have show distance 10, 5. So when it calls that function, 10 is speed, 5 is time. So 10 times 5. The next one is 85, gets put into speed. 1.5 gets put into time. It's going to multiply, just go there and put in an alert box. And we got 12 and 9 and 42 and 21. So now if we execute this guy, there's 50, that's that first one that's executed. Oh, there's 127.5, 108, 882, and then it's done. So pretty simple. So as you can see, that function gets called multiple times. So if we ever have code that needs to be executed time and time and time again, that's when we want to put it into a function so that we can reuse it within our code. We never want to duplicate code. If we do duplicate code, we always put it into a function. So in this case here, we might have a situation. Again, these are pretty simple JavaScript programs, but we might have something that's pretty complex. And every now and then we might ask the user for time and speed, and then we call that function. And those functions can get very complex. Think of something like think of a function that calculates federal income tax. Okay, and there's a lot of factors we have to know. We have to know if they're married or happy. I mean single, and then we have to know how many dependents they have. Do they get paid monthly? Do they get paid biweekly? They get paid weekly. We have to know all those different things, and then we have this big, huge. So that is a monster of a function. Again, we might have that function sit there as we get information from different users. We then call that function to get the different federal income taxes by person, depending on their different parameters that they have. Okay, so functions, great way to something that can be recalled and recalled and recalled again. And that's kind of what they get into on page 26 through, I think it's 30. They really kind of break the function down and kind of go into more detail what I just said. But basically, we have the function. Let's see, what do they call it? That's called that's the keyword, the function keyword. And then we name of our function is called show distance. And then inside the parentheses are the parameters that get passed into the function. And then what's between the two braces, those are the actions that are going to be executed when this function is called. And then we have what's down here, which is called the show distance 10, 5. That is the function call. So we call the function itself. And it's very important that you put these in the right order, because the very first number is always going to be speed, and the second number is always going to be time. In this particular case, it doesn't matter because we're just doing the multiplication, but just realize that speed is the very first number, time is the second. So if there were some different functions different calculations going on the side of that function, it would really make a big difference on what they basically get, how they get calculated. So let's say we have a function that I want to call, but I want to get something back. So we can do that as well. And that is called a function. Come on, where is it? Yeah, here we go. So open up function expression 01, and there we have area is equal to function width comma height, and inside there is width. That's not what I want to show. Hold on. I thought I had it called return. Oh, there it is. Speed time function return. That's what I was looking for. So speed time function return. We'll cover that one in just a second as well. I'm kind of a scatterbrain. So here I've got function distance speed comma time. Let distance equals speed times time. Then I say return distance. So whenever we want to pass something back from a function, we have to use the word return. So in this case, I'm saying return distance. So how do we get that loaded into something? Well, here I can say let my distance. So we just created a variable called my distance. What's it going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to get distance 10, 5. So we passed in 10, 5. It multiplies those together, and it returns that to my distance. Then I can basically do an alert of my distance. So if we run that, speed time, function return, there we have 50. Now, if we really wanted to get more descriptive, we could actually do let's see. Double quote. Distance is and then add that onto there. And notice I've got a plus sign. And we always think plus sign being addition. Well, if I have two numeric values, that will do an addition. But if I want to do what's called concatenation, I can actually use a plus sign to glue these two pieces together. So now when I run it, it says distance is 50. So now we can be a little more descriptive in what we're doing. So that's always kind of nice, because then before it displayed 50, what does that mean? Well, we can say distance is, get distance, 10, 5, multiplies together and returns it as 50, and there we go. So concatenation looks like a plus sign. It will do addition, but if we want to do concatenation with text and numerics, we can do that with a concatenation symbol, which is also the plus sign. Okay, so return, very important for returning data from a function. Let's see, there's one I want to talk about before we get to the other one. It's called that's not it. I should have wrote these down in the book so I knew what I was basically doing. There we go. This is it. It's called function return exit early. Again, I should have said this at the beginning. If you want to pause the video on time so you can take a few minutes to open these up, please by all means do. So here I've got function get distance, speed, time. Let distance equal speed times time, and then it returns distance. And below that it says if speed is less than 0, distance times or multiplication. So multiplication in programming is an asterisk. So I've got asterisk equal, and that says take the distance and multiply it by -1 in this case. And so that's basically would do that. So if I had speed equals to, let's make it 10. So speed is less than 10. Let's make it 20. So we know it. We know that this if statement, again, we haven't covered if statements yet, but we have covered if statements yet. So we've got if speed less than 20, so if that statement is true, we're going to, no, we haven't covered if statements yet. I just covered in my head. Bear with me. Okay. So I got if speed is less than 20, so if that statement is true, it's going to make distance multiplied by -1. Okay. So here we've got speed is 10, so that's less than 20. So let's see what that does to our, so if we run this, well, it says 50. Well, why is that? Because that's 10 times 5. Because here's what happened. When it hit this line right here, return distance, it's done. It left that function. It's no longer, it doesn't do anything else in that function. It came back from that function, and so it displayed get distance 10, 5. So this never ever executes. So just realize once a function hits that return statement, it's done. It doesn't do anything else that's inside of there. So if you need to do this if statement, you got to make sure that's above before the return statement. So very, very important that we know that once it hits a return, it's done with that function. Okay. Yeah, so let's continue on. I was going to talk about this one. And yeah, so we could say let speed equal 10, let time equals 5, and we could do an alert. So that's a very simple speed time. We talked about that, I think. Yeah, we talked about that one. Okay. So let's go on to chapter 4, and then we're going to do a lab. So chapter 4 is now if, then, else statements. Okay, I got confused a few seconds ago. So I was doing my I was doing my preparation, and I had just covered if then else, and I thought we'd already covered. We haven't yet, so bear with me. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and open up Chapter 4, If Else. So let's take a look at it. So I create a variable inside of my script, let safe to proceed equals true. Now, this data type is what's called a Boolean data type. Boolean is either true or false. Okay? And we set safe to proceed equal true. I have an if statement. Now, if statements, we do if, left parenthesis, and right parenthesis. The condition to check is inside of there. Now, I could say if safe to proceed equals true, I could say that. But if I leave that off, that is doing the same exact thing as saying, hey, is this true? If this statement is true, then do this. The else statement says, if this is false, do this. So if we run Chapter 4, if else, we get the alert, you shall pass. Why? Because that statement was true. Okay. Now, do we have to have an else statement? No, we don't have to have an else statement. I could basically take that away and just basically run it this way, and it will still run the same exact way. So if I come over here in Chapter 4 and do it says you shall pass. But let me do this. Let me change this to false and run it. And now when I refresh, absolutely nothing happens. Why? Because there was no else statement. So if I go ahead and put that back in there, so now if that is false, it's going to say you shall not pass. Now if I come up here and do a refresh, it says you shall not pass. Okay? So if you want to pause this and kind of play around with that, make it false, make it true, take out the else statement, see what happens. But let me, before you do that, make sure that you have a matching brace. So since I have a matching brace there, there's a matching brace there. Now what's nice is if I click in front of that each brace, it will show me the matching brace that goes with it. If you leave one out, I think it will Notepad show you an error. Yeah, it's showing the see on the side over here, it's got green. Right there is that red, and that's basically saying, hey, you're missing something here. And if you tried to run this, so if I did a save, and I tried to run this, nothing's going to run because you got an error. The sad thing is it doesn't tell you that you're going to have an error. It just basically doesn't run at all. And it does show green, doesn't it? Yeah. So again, kind of one of those things that, yeah, what it's saying is that you just modified. The orange says you just modified that. Okay. Now when I save it, okay. So just realize it's not real intuitive as far as debugging. You just kind of have to try to figure out what the problem is. And one of the things you can always check is making sure you always have a matching ending and beginning and ending brace. Okay. So we see if statements. We can have an if statement all by itself. We don't have to have an else. We can use an else. And another thing we can do is we can use these things called operators. So if I come in here and open up if-else operators. So on page 44, it's got this table and it shows equal, greater than equal to, greater than, less than or equal to, less than, not equal to, and or. Okay? Now you'll notice equal to is different. It's got two equal signs side by side. If we have just a single equal sign, that's called an assignment. That's like let x equals 5. So that means assign the variable y to the numeric value of 5. If you have two equal signs, so if I have just a single equal sign inside my if statement, it's going to try to do an assignment. If you want to do a comparison, you need to use two equal signs to compare. If A equals B, so if A equal B, that's a comparison between A and B. So here we have function send warning. Okay, so here I've got, oh, you know, I got ahead of myself. Let's open up. Yeah, I guess let's just look at that one, I guess. Okay, so here's what we've got. We've got send warning x, comma, y. And what that says is if x is less than x POS, and x POS is 300, and y POS is 150, and, you know, it's got the two ampersands together, that's an and statement. Y is less than y POS. Now, there's a whole section we could spend on what's called Boolean algebra, and that's true, false, not true, not false. There's a whole slew of different things. But according to Boolean algebra, if you have an and in here, both of these statements have to be true in order for it to come in and execute a juxtaposition. If one is false and one is true, then that whole entire statement is false and it will drop into the else. It's very, very important that we know when we use an and, everything has to be true on both sides of that and, okay? And in order for the whole thing to be true. If one of them is false, the whole thing is considered false. And it's with the or statement, so if I had an or statement in here, if I had the two pipe symbols, according to Boolean algebra, only one of them has to be true in order for the whole thing to be true. So if x less than x POS is false, but y less than y POS is true, the whole thing is considered true. So only one of the items has to be true. Okay, so here we have if x less than POS, so we'll have send warning, so we're going to call this function this many different times, and we are missing a closing brace. I can see that right off the bat. We are missing a closing brace. Okay. Save that. So, yeah. Now notice, one thing before I continue, notice I've got if, and then I've got the closing brace, else, open brace. Do they have to be in the same line like that? No, they don't. I could actually have those on different lines like this. So I could actually do that, and it's going to work just fine. But what's nice, when we do it the other way, it basically has less lines and makes the code a little tighter and maybe sometimes a little easier to read. So anyway, so the first time it's going to basically have 500 in X and 160 in Y. And notice we've got 300 and 500, and that statement is going to be false and false. The one is 100, 100, and that's going to be true, true. The next one is 201, 149, and that one's going to be true, true. Okay? So let's run it. Things are fine. Adjust the position, adjust the position. So the first one was false, false, so it said, it was false, true, so it dropped in the else and said things are fine. The next one was true, true, and it said adjust the position. And the next one was true, true, adjust position. I could make this 301, and this one is now false, but this one is true, and it's basically going to drop into the things are fine. So things are fine, adjust position, and things are fine. Okay. Now, this next one, oh, wrong one. Is called the else if. So chapter 4, else if. And let's take a look at this guy. Now, here we've got a whole bunch of else ifs. So I'm going to go back to this previous one, and we could do something like this that says else if, let me just duplicate this. Else if that one is greater than that. I have my open brace. Okay. I need one more closing brace down here. I need to indent these in. And indenting is very, very it's important for readability's sake. So here I've got if that is true, true, I do that, else if that is true, true, do that. Okay? But instead of doing all that, what I could do is use what's called an else if. I've got if color is equal, so here I said let color equal green. If color is equal to, see the two equal signs side by side? If it's equal to yellow, alert color yellow. Now notice what I have in the else statement. I've got else if color equal red. Alert color red, else if color equal blue, alert color blue, else if color equal green, alert color green, else if color equal black, alert color black, and then else. If all of these are false, it's going to say no known color specified. We know it's green, so let's go ahead and run it. I think I already ran it once. Yep. It says color green. Why? Color green is true, so when it gets to this else if, color equals green, alert color green. Okay? So the nice thing about that, as opposed you can see how the else and then the if is separate from the else, has to come down a couple lines. This is all on one line, and it's a lot easier to read. Now we have another way we can do this. So let's open up what's called chapter 4 switch. Now switch statement and an else if do the same exact thing, except one just written a little differently. So basically it's like an if statement, if else statement. So here I've got let color equal green, and I've got switch color. So it says look at that variable color, and if the case is yellow, go ahead and do an alert color yellow. We'll talk about the break statement here in just a second. I've got case red, alert color red, case blue. Okay, it keeps going on. And notice it says default alert no known color specified. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem with the switch statement, or I should say, here is a problem, but they've got a workaround. It's going to keep going through these case statements. If the color was yellow, it's going to keep checking for red, blue, and the rest of them. But we have a break statement in there. It says if the case is yellow, it's going to do alert color yellow, and then the break statement says get out of this switch statement. So automatically drops out past this closing brace right here. So when we hit the color green, it goes and hits the break and gets out. Now, it's got a break statement inside the default. Is that really needed? Probably not. We really don't need it because the next statement it does after that. So if it did do default, it would be, so if I'm going to add the number 2 to that. I'm going to do a save, and I'm going to run it. So do a refresh, and it comes up. So Did I do it save? It's just color. Oh, I didn't run the color switch yet. My bad. So let me run the color switch. It comes up and says, okay, something is wrong. Let's take a look. Got my matching brace. I'm missing a semicolon anywhere. Let me pause this for a sec. Okay, I realized what I did is after when we use a case statement, we have to use a colon, not a semicolon. So when we have an executable line, we always have the ending of a semicolon. But for switch statements, we always make sure we have a colon. So in this case, I've got switch color, case yellow, alert yellow, so on and so forth. So this one here, I want to change that to green. So let's run it real quick. So if I run this, it says color green. But I want to come in here and change that to green 2. So we'll basically go to the default. And now when I run it, it says no known color specified. Now I'm going to go back in and take out that break statement, and let's see what happens. And no color specified, and it runs just fine. So, but we should always make it a habit, kind of like let statements, always using a let statement to declare a variable. We should always basically have a break statements on every single case or default. But they're needed on every case statement. Okay. Yeah. At the back of the chapter, it talks about deciding which ones to use, and it says they're pretty much interchangeable. As you can see, this switch statement and this else if statement basically do the same exact thing. They end up with the same exact ending results. Which one do you use? And the author of the book says, my personal preference is to go whatever is more readable. Okay? So is the switch case a little more readable, or is the else a little more readable? As you can see, there's a lot of text right here, whereas if you look at the switch, it's a little more broken out, maybe a little more readable. So again, personal preference. I've seen both. I've worked with both. It's just whatever is basically utilized at that point. Okay, so what you do right now is pause this video, and if you go to Google Classroom and go to classwork, down there I have a JavaScript Cache Lab. Go ahead and click on that, and it basically tells what I want you to do for that. So take a few minutes to get that done and come on back. Okay, so let's go ahead and get on to Chapter 5, and let's go ahead and open up Chapter 5, the for loop. Chapter 5, for loop. And let's take a look at this guy. Now this is a loop. It's going to execute multiple times. So right off the bat, you notice I have for, and inside the for loop, there's 3 parts. The first part gets executed once at the very beginning of the loop. The second part, right after the semicolon, is the check at the beginning of every loop. This is what determines if we're going to go into the loop or not. And then at the end is what gets executed at the end of every loop. Okay? So at the very beginning of the loop, we do this only once. It says let I, so we create a variable called I, we set it to 0. And it says while I is less than 10, go into the loop. What we're going to do is we're going to call this function say something. So it's got basically function say something. It's just going to do a document write. Now we haven't talked about document write. We'll talk about that here in just a second. And then it comes back. After it executes this, after it does the call for that function, it adds 1 to I. So the first time through, it's a 0. When it comes to the second time, I is now 1. Next time through is a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, it's a 9 right now. Now think of that. It's going to execute 10 times because it's going to go from 0 to 9. So 0 through 9 is 10 times. So while I is less than 10, so we're at 9 right now. We call say something. We add 1 to I. It's now 10. We come back up. It says, is 10 less than 10? No, it's not. It's going to drop out of the loop, and then it's done. Now, since that's a function, it's not going to execute unless we call it. So we should see hello world 10 times. So if we execute this, there we have it. Now let's go back in here and take a look. Notice how it printed on the screen. That's because of the document write. When I say document.write, wherever we're at, it's going to basically display it right there. So if I had a whole bunch of other stuff on my body right here, it's going to have this hello world appear across the screen. Notice it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Okay, so document.write. So I can do an alert. I can do a document.write, or as we saw in that one of the very first examples, we got the button where I can actually use that special code in there that actually attaches it to an ID that's somewhere on that form. So if I want this to appear in a special place, I would use that and then have that ID field to display this at a specific point on my HTML page. So that's the basic part of the for loop. So again, there's 3 parts. First part gets done at the very beginning of the loop and only once. The second part is the check at the beginning of every loop. Is that true? If it's true, I'm going to go into the loop. And the last part is what gets executed at the very end of the loop. So it never goes into the loop. That last part will never get executed. And the book goes into detail about each one of the conditional parts, that type of thing. So if we wanted to skip an iteration, so we could do this. Let's do open chapter 5, skip iteration. So let's take a look at this. So here I've got a combination of a loop and an if statement. So I've got let floors equal to 28. And so here's my for loop. So the very first thing it's going to do is going to create a variable called I, set it to 1. While I is less than or equal to floors. Now I want to include 28. I want to go from 1 to 28. I do not want to have 0 to 27. So that's what that's about. So while that's true, we're going to go into the loop. I've got I plus plus. Now notice the very first thing we do is say if I is equal to 13, we just say continue. So if that's true, we'll talk about what it's going to do. But the next thing we do, we've got document write at floor, whatever's in I, and then we do a line break. So I'm expecting it to have 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 28, right? Well, what happens when it gets to 13? Well, let's run it. Let's see what happens. At floor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. There's no 13th floor. Well, why? Because continue said continue on with the loop. Skip everything else and continue just like it goes. It says add 1 to the I and basically go back around again. So it doesn't do anything else except hit the end of the loop, come back around, and basically continue on. So the continue says continue on with the loop. Don't do anything else, just continue on. So this will get executed, so it adds 1 to I, and then it continues on with the loop. So that's why it skipped floor 13. It never executed this document.write.ln. Okay, so document.write.ln displays on the screen. In this case, it basically is at floor, displays the number, whatever's an I, and then a BR to do a line break. Notice we got the concatenation symbols. They're concatenation symbols when we have strings. If they're numeric values or variables, it will do an addition. Okay. So nice way to do that. So we can have it skip things. We can also go backwards. So if we open up for loop backwards, now this is just like the first one, the first for loop we covered, except it's a little different. I'm going to say let I equals 28. And this time I'm going to say while I is greater than or equal to floors, in this case it's a 1 now, I'm going to say I minus minus. So the very first thing that happens only once is I get set to 28. Then we check, is 28 greater than or equal to floors? It is. I do a document write at floor I br. So the same exact document write ln command. But this time I subtract 1. So an I minus minus subtracts 1 from I. So the next time through it's a 27. Is 27 greater than or equal to floors? Yes, it is, and it continues on. So when we run this guy, there we go from 28 to 1. And notice we did 13 this time. It's kind of cool. So for loops are kind of neat that way, where we can actually program it to go backwards. We could actually do this as well. We could actually say minus equal 2. What's that going to do? That says subtract 2 from I. So minus equal 2 says subtract 2 from I. So if I were to run that now, want to do a refresh? 28, 26, 24, 22, all the way down to 2. Okay, pretty cool. Or we can just do a minus minus. Okay. So that's the for loop. We also have what's called a while loop. So let's take a look at that guy. And the while loop says, I got let count equals 0, while count less than 10. So here's what's going on there. It says, I'm only going to go into this loop while this statement is true. Document.writeLn looping away, and then it's got a line break. Then I say count plus plus. It's going to come back around, and now count is a 1. Next time through it's a 2, 3, 4, and all the way until it gets to a 9. And then when you add to it, it's now a 10. Is 10 less than 10? No, it's not. It's going to drop out of that loop. So we execute that guy. And there we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Now, we also have what's called a do-while loop. So let's open up the do-while loop. The do-while loop is a lot like a while loop, except it's got a do in there. So let's take a look at it. It says do, document looping away, and then count plus plus. But this time the check is at the end of the loop. Now, what's the difference between checking at the beginning or the end? Well, in this case, count could be false. This while statement could be false. But since we have a do, with a do while, it's always going to execute at least once. So if we have a situation where we always want to make sure it gets executed at least once, we can do a do while loop. That way it will execute once, and then it does the check whether to continue on. Okay? So the check is at the end of the loop as opposed to the beginning. And there'll be certain times where you need it to execute at least once, and then that's when you check to see, hey, do I need to continue on? So do while and a while loop, the only difference is a do while loop will always execute at least once. With the while loop, we do have a chance where it might not. That statement could be false. Okay, so that's it for chapter 7. Chapter 6, I'll cover that very, very quickly. Chapter 6 is a great way to put comments in your code. So we can actually do this. So a simple comment is a // Anything that follows a / on that line will be ignored by the browser. Okay, so we could say count is used to keep track. Okay, so again, we're going to use comments. Now I can put it there, or I could actually put it above the line. So I might basically do this. Count is used to keep track. Okay, so that's one type of comment. And again, I can put this comment anywhere. I could put it here. I could put it here. I can put it here. So again, anytime you see // everything behind that is ignored. Now, I can't do this now. I can't say let y equal 0 and a semicolon. That's now part of the comment. If you want that to basically, you'd have to do that. You have to be outside of that line in order to basically be executable. Now, if I want to have if I wanted to have a big block of comments, well, I could do this. I could basically have // a whole bunch of asterisks. This is a block comment. And then just duplicate that line right there. And now we got a nice block. But since it's multiple lines, I can actually do this. I can actually do an asterisk, a /ampersand, or sorry, a /asterisk. And then at the very end, I just do an asterisk /. So let me kind of do this so we can kind of see it a little better. So I have a /asterisk and an asterisk /. It says everything between a /asterisk and an asterisk / will be ignored by the browser and treated as a comment. Remember how we saw comments in HTML? Where I had the less than symbol and then exclamation point / and then / greater than symbol. That's how we could do the same thing here with comments in JavaScript. This only works in JavaScript. It doesn't work anywhere else. Okay, so single line comment and then basically blocks of comments. Okay. We also have what's called JS doc style comments, and what these do, if we have some kind of a JavaScript editor, it will actually create documentation automatically. And so that all it has to do is start with /**. So whenever we have /**, you should see a color change. Yeah, see how this is green? It's kind of hard to tell. But as soon as I do /**, it kind of turns into a bluish green. And that's different now. And we can have different parameters like ampersand author. I can say Mark Webb. Ampersand version 1.0. And what will happen is when this basically there's Java document or JavaScript documentation, editors will automatically create and turn this into documentation for this program. So it's kind of cool. We won't go into that, but just realize it is available. And that's really all there is for chapter 6. So here's what we'll do. Is let's go ahead and pause this video and go ahead and execute or do JavaScript class lab 2. Okay? And then we'll come back. Okay, so that is the end of week 3. Let's go ahead and out there is the homework assignment. Again, if you have any questions on the homework, make sure you basically give me a call, contact me. I'll be more than happy. If you need to do a Zoom and share your screen and get some help, I'd be more than happy to do it as well. So we'll go ahead and see you next lecture.